As a helpful expert, I will draw on the information provided in the sources to create a comprehensive and detailed response. The sources discuss themes of hidden truths being revealed, divine justice, healing from manipulation, and spiritual warfare. I will elaborate on these themes as they are presented in the transcripts. Brothers and sisters in Christ, some spiritual battles do not announce themselves with dramatic displays. Rather, they begin in a profound stillness, a silence so deep that it compels our attention. It is akin to the subtle shift in the wind before a significant downpour, a change that our very souls can sense, indicating an impending spiritual transformation. Have you ever experienced that unsettling feeling that what has been concealed is now beginning to emerge, that the outward charm and charisma you once trusted now feels more like a carefully constructed facade? These are not mere fleeting emotions. They are, the sources suggest, potential warning signs from God. The nature of spiritual conflict is not always characterized by overt aggression or loud confrontations. Indeed, the most significant movements of God can often manifest in the quiet revelation of long-hidden truths, in the unveiling of that which has been deliberately obscured. Narcissistic abuse, frequently masked by a false image and insidious emotional manipulation, does not escape the notice of our Lord. When a sense of peace begins to return to a troubled heart, when the fog of confusion starts to dissipate, and when truth gently surfaces, this is not merely the process of healing, it is an act of divine protection. It signifies that God sees all, and His justice is not a distant prospect. The source references C.S. Lewis, who purportedly wrote that God permits us to experience the low points in our lives to impart lessons that could not be learned otherwise. Therefore, I ask you, what is God revealing to you in this season of your life? Has there been a discernible shift in the spiritual atmosphere surrounding someone close to you? Do you sense an impending exposure, a revealing of what was once hidden? These signs are not to be feared, rather, they serve as confirmation that God is at work, and you are not navigating these challenges in isolation. There are moments when heaven seems unusually quiet, yet a sacred unfolding is taking place, not in thunderous pronouncements, but in the gentle unveiling of what was once concealed. The mask of deception begins to slip, and those who once lauded a false image start to perceive the reality behind the carefully crafted charm. Have you ever observed how God, in His profound mercy, often initiates His judgment through revelation, clearing the skies before the storm breaks? This revelation is not always accompanied by loud pronouncements. Sometimes, it is merely a subtle shift in your perception of someone you once held in high regard, that quiet feeling that something is fundamentally amiss, a feeling that becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. Words that were once sweet now ring hollow, and smiles that once seemed genuine now appear rehearsed. What once held an enchanting quality now generates unease. The sources assure us that this is not paranoia, but a clarity bestowed by God Himself. Truth, the sources declare, will be revealed in its due time, and once it begins to emerge, it cannot be suppressed. The superficial charm of the narcissist will fade, much like smoke dissipating in the daylight. Their manipulative tactics, once disguised as kindness or even spirituality, will begin to unravel. This is a moment of intense spiritual warfare, and you are no longer under the sway of their influence. God is exposing the darkness. This exposure, the sources emphasize, is not intended to shame you for having been deceived, but rather to liberate you from its binding grip. Vengeance belongs to the Lord, but truth is presented as His mercy in action, a means by which divine justice often commences. The sources again invoke C.S. Lewis, who supposedly observed that the safest path to hell is a gradual one. Similarly, the mask of deception may fall slowly at first, but the process will accelerate as God prepares to act. The control tactics employed by the narcissist, once effective, will begin to malfunction. Those around you will start to see through the carefully constructed illusion, and you will no longer be alone in questioning the reality they present. Their false image will crack, and their charm will begin to backfire. The sources firmly state, "Do not be deceived, God is not mocked. A man reaps what he sows," Galatians 6 verse 7. Scripture reminds us that nothing is hidden from God's sight, He sees everything. While His patience may seem like a delay, it is, in fact, an expression of grace. However, when He moves, His actions are certain. The slipping of the mask is a clear indication that judgment is coming, and it cannot be halted by denial or pretense. Within your spirit, you might experience a peculiar blend of grief and relief, grief for the time spent under their influence, and relief at the newfound freedom to see clearly. This emotional response is not a sign of weakness but a testament to healing. It signifies that your discernment is being restored, and that God protects the innocent, freeing you from the gaslighting that once distorted your perception of reality. The veil has been lifted, and though you may initially feel isolated, the sources assure you that you are not experiencing mere confusion. This is clarity emerging from the chaos. God is granting you the ability to see what was previously hidden in shadow, bringing it into the light. This exposure of darkness is presented as an act of divine love, revealing the true nature of individuals, not to instill fear, but to grant liberation. As the mask of the narcissist begins to fall, the sources advise against rushing to expose them yourself. God, in His sovereignty, does not require our defense. He reveals in His own perfect timing. As one layer of deception peels away, a sense of stillness begins to settle within your soul, a peace you had perhaps forgotten was attainable. This often begins subtly, like the gradual lifting of a fog. You may not pinpoint the exact moment it started, but suddenly, the internal noise, the relentless pressure, the constant self-doubt, the emotional control, and the gaslighting begin to lose their power. What once caused you to feel disoriented now falls flat. You begin to breathe freely again. The sources affirm that peace after abuse is real, and it is the gentle whisper of God drawing you back to your authentic self. Confusion is described as a favored weapon of the enemy, clouding the path, obscuring the truth, and keeping the soul in bondage. However, our God is not a God of confusion but of peace. 1 Corinthians 14 verse 33. When the fog lifts, it is not a coincidence but the Lord stepping into your situation. That gentle clarity is His way of reassuring you, you're safe now, I'm here. A holy stillness begins to permeate your heart, distinct from the false calm born of fear-driven silence, but rather a deep, grounded peace. You start to recognize the patterns of the past for what they were: toxic relationships, not love; lies and deception, not truth; chaos that originated not from God. As this chaos recedes, you feel the difference. Spiritual healing often commences with the return of inner quiet. You no longer feel compelled to explain every detail, to rehearse conversations in your mind. The cycle of anxiety weakens. Finding peace is not about denying the pain of the past but about acknowledging it for what it was and realizing that it no longer defines you. God is restoring your capacity for clear thinking and wise decision-making. This clarity is not merely emotional but a spiritual reawakening of vision. What you are experiencing is not simply relief but divine intervention. When God fights on your behalf, the battle begins in unseen realms. He quiets the internal storm before bringing calm to the external circumstances, like a shepherd guiding his sheep back from the thorns, drawing you back to truth and, consequently, to peace. This is not just healing, it is a reclamation of your identity after the storm of manipulation. Following the storm, you may notice improvements in your physical and emotional well-being: sleeping better, smiling more, breathing more deeply. The oppressive grip that once held your soul captive is weakening. You are breaking free, even if the outward circumstances with the narcissist remain unchanged. This is presented as evidence of God's work. No weapon formed against you could steal what He is now restoring. The sources emphasize that God's timing is perfect, and He initiates with peace because peace prepares the heart for what is to come. C.S. Lewis is quoted again, reflecting that God whispers in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. If you are now experiencing a whisper of peace, it suggests that the shouting is over, not because justice has been bypassed, but because divine justice is moving quietly in the background. You are being repositioned emotionally and spiritually for God's future actions. As this clarity deepens, so too does your courage. The confusion lifts, not only to provide rest but to equip you for the moment when the manipulations begin to fail. There arrives a point when the tools of deception lose their efficacy. What once held power over your emotions, emotional control, flattery, gaslighting, begins to collapse under its own weight. It is as if the very weapons designed to dominate you are turning inward, losing their effectiveness. The strategies that once manipulated you now seem strangely impotent. This is not accidental, it is God dismantling the strongholds. When truth enters, manipulation cannot endure for long, much like darkness receding with the first light of dawn. Lies begin to scatter, and control tactics intended to create confusion and guilt become clumsy and exposed. You begin to anticipate the patterns of manipulation before they fully unfold. The narcissist's charm transforms into desperation, and all the while, heaven is quietly at work, exposing darkness not through force, but through light. One of the initial signs of this shift is a change in your reactions. Where you once yielded under pressure, you now stand quietly unshaken. You no longer fear their withdrawal of affection or approval. The hooks they once used to tether your soul now snap like brittle twine. The sources reiterate, God is not mocked. What was sown in deception begins to reap disorder. Judgment is coming, and it commences with broken influence. Psalm 7 verses 14 to 16 is cited. Whoever is pregnant with evil conceives trouble and gives birth to disillusionment. The trouble they cause recoils on them. This is not merely poetic expression but prophecy in motion. You will witness their own deceptive schemes ensnaring them. Their narratives will contradict each other, their followers will begin to question their pronouncements, and their false image will flicker like a malfunctioning light bulb. Amidst this unfolding, you will remain in peace, and there is something profoundly sacred in observing this downfall without bitterness or a desire for revenge, but rather as a witness to divine justice. This is what transpires when God fights on your behalf. He allows the plans of the oppressors to unravel on their own, requiring no direct intervention from you. Your silence becomes more potent than any defense, and your newfound freedom becomes their undoing. Truth will be revealed, and you may begin to hear others echoing the sentiments you once held alone. Something feels off, I'm starting to see it too. The veil lifts not only from your eyes but from theirs as well, and what once isolated you now connects you with others who also perceive the truth behind the mask. You are not alone. God is forming witnesses, exposing the narcissist not only to you but to the wider community. The manipulative tactics that once operated so smoothly, gaslighting, charm, guilt, become increasingly transparent. People are no longer falling for them. Their charm wears thin, their words, once as smooth as honey, now sound rehearsed and insincere. The illusion is shattering. Behind the scenes, the Spirit of God moves like an unseen but undeniable wind, tearing down every hidden stronghold. C.S. Lewis is quoted again, observing that evil invariably reveals itself by trying too hard, unable to know when to stop. Consequently, the narcissist persists, oblivious that each attempt to regain control only further exposes their true nature. What they intended for power becomes their downfall, and what they intended for silence becomes your testimony. God will judge the narcissist, and no manipulation will escape his notice. Even as their world begins to crumble, yours grows increasingly stable. You are no longer seeking validation or attempting to convince others of the truth. You are observing God's hand at work. Deep within your spirit, you begin to sense what often follows the failure of manipulation, emotional detachment, which sets the stage for ultimate freedom. There is often a quiet, almost imperceptible moment when your heart no longer aches with the same intensity it once did, the emotional pull weakens, and the constant internal dialogue filled with doubt and longing begins to subside. This is not coldness but healing. This is the feeling of God gently severing the ties of soul-level control. Emotional detachment is not bitterness, it is clarity, the sacred work of breaking free from what was never intended to hold you. In His mercy, God is removing your heart from the grip of the narcissist's manipulation. What felt like love was often merely emotional control cloaked in charm and illusion, but now the light has dawned. Isaiah 61 verse 1 is referenced, proclaiming that He came to bind up the brokenhearted and to proclaim freedom for the captives. This healing is not just survival but sacred restoration. You are not simply recovering from pain but reclaiming your identity. The version of you that was silenced is beginning to breathe again, and God is overseeing every step. You may find that you no longer feel obligated to respond to their messages, defend yourself, or maintain appearances. That inner compulsion to please or fix has faded. This is not indifference but peace. God is severing the invisible chains of trauma bonding, preparing you for something greater than mere survival, peace of mind and emotional healing. The memories may still exist, but they no longer define you. You can look at the past without being dragged back into it. This is how you know God is near. Letting go is no longer terrifying but becomes a quiet form of obedience, not to prove strength to others but to rest in divine protection and trust His judgment. Others may not understand this transformation in you. Some may say you have changed, and the truth is, you have. God has initiated the process of spiritual healing, bringing distance from everything that once distorted your perception. What once drained you now seems foreign. What once controlled you now feels powerless. C.S. Lewis is quoted once more, likening overcoming a painful experience to crossing monkey bars. You must let go at some point to move forward. That moment is now. You are no longer clinging to what God has asked you to release. The burden was never yours to bear. You are being prepared for freedom, not just in feeling but in truth. The narcissist may sense this shift. Their words may become more desperate, their attempts at control more erratic, but by now, the peace within you is louder than their chaos. Their voice, once a storm, now sounds like wind behind closed windows. This is what happens when God protects the innocent. He removes the sting before the final separation. As your soul rests in this newfound stillness, something powerful begins to unfold. Detachment is not the end but the doorway. Just as your heart grows distant from the manipulator, heaven prepares something else, exposure without effort, where truth rises not by your hand but by the sovereign will of God. There is something sacred in standing still while heaven moves on your behalf. You reach a point where silence becomes your strength. The battle no longer belongs to you. It never truly did. What was done in secret begins to surface, not through your voice but by the hand of the Almighty. Public exposure is not revenge but divine justice in plain sight. You no longer need to prove anything. God begins to draw back the curtain, and the truth speaks for itself. What they tried to hide, lies and deception, the mask of the narcissist can no longer sustain. The web they wove begins to collapse. You, once accused and doubted, now watch as the fruit of truth grows in the open. Luke 12 verse 2 is referenced. There is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. God keeps His promises. When God exposes darkness, He does so with perfect timing and purpose. The narcissist's charm begins to decay under the weight of their own actions. Their false image cannot withstand the light of heaven. You may hear rumors, testimonies, or simple realizations whispered among those who once doubted you. One by one, eyes begin to open. The silence that once shielded the deceiver now turns against them. People see through the illusion. Control tactics lose credibility, and the very audience they once manipulated becomes the witness of their downfall. There is no need for you to defend yourself. God is fighting for you without sword or argument. He is the judge, and vengeance belongs to Him. You are not being ignored. You are being vindicated. In His wisdom, He waited, and now God's judgment begins, not with wrath but with revelation. The very stage they built for applause becomes their undoing. You sense the shift not just in individuals but in the atmosphere. Their words no longer stir fear within you. Their actions no longer shake your foundation. You begin to understand that this is not merely exposure. It is evidence of divine order. The storm is not yours to command, but the sun is breaking through it anyway. The truth will be revealed, and it will not be silenced. C.S. Lewis insightfully pointed out that the hardness of God is kinder than the softness of men. While we may long for gentle justice, sometimes love requires confrontation, not to destroy but to set things right. When God exposes the narcissist, it is not cruelty but clarity for those trapped in the illusion. It is mercy to the deceived. Perhaps the most humbling aspect of it all is that you did not have to fight, campaign, or shout. God allowed you to rest while He acted, and in that rest, you recovered parts of yourself long buried under the weight of accusation. Without lifting a finger, you witness how God responds to hidden cruelty. As the light continues to shine and shadows scatter, a profound change begins to occur, not just around you but within. It is more than public truth. It is a shift in the spiritual realm. You begin to feel it deep within you, like the stillness before a storm, because what follows exposure is not silence but a sudden shift in the atmosphere. There are moments when you cannot quite articulate what has changed, only that something has. You awaken with a sense that the season has turned, the air feels different, the burden feels lighter. What once tormented your spirit now passes by without affecting you. This is not coincidence but a spiritual signal. Time is running out for the oppressor. You are no longer reacting from fear but resting in quiet confidence. The atmosphere carries weight, but not the weight of dread, rather the weight of divine presence. Something has broken, something has moved. You can sense it in the stillness. God's judgment draws near, not with chaos but with order, precision, and the peace of one who knows the end from the beginning. Isaiah 30 verse 18 declares, "For the Lord is a God of justice, blessed are all who wait for him." You have waited, you have wept, but now heaven shifts in your favor. It is not loud or showy, but it is real. When God's timing is perfect, the shift begins not in the visible world but in the unseen realms, and you sense it not with your physical eyes but with your spirit. There is less resistance in your prayers now, more clarity in your thoughts. The spiritual warfare has not ceased, but you can feel the balance of power shifting. God is not mocked. The cycle is reaching its conclusion. While the narcissist may still feign control, their grip is weakening. The power they once wielded is draining as heaven reclaims its ground. It is in these moments that many ponder what comes next. Will justice be swift? Will truth be proclaimed aloud? But God's movements often do not align with our timelines. His work is frequently hidden until the appointed hour. Still, he provides you with this sign. You are being liberated, not only from them but from the spiritual atmosphere they created, one of confusion, fear, and constant control. C.S. Lewis once reflected that the future arrives for everyone at the same pace, 60 minutes per hour, regardless of who one is or what they do. This truth remains. The narcissist cannot evade the impending reckoning. The timing is not theirs to manipulate. The public exposure was a warning, but now comes the divine shift, an invisible hand turning the page. You may observe divine signs from God in subtle yet significant ways, a sense of inner calm, unexpected confirmations, or doors that were once closed now opening. These are not insignificant occurrences. They are evidence that heaven is aligning your steps for what lies ahead. You are not merely recovering from trauma but stepping into restoration. Your breakthrough is imminent. This shift is not solely about justice for the past but preparation for the future. God never concludes one chapter without beginning another. What was once a battlefield is becoming sacred ground. You are being reestablished not by your own strength but by His will. Even now, as the old order collapses, the new is being built in silence. And so, as the narcissist loses their grip and the atmosphere grows still, something holy rises within you. Not fear, not pride, but a sense of knowing that the battle is nearing its end, that healing is not just a possibility but a promise. From this stillness, the Spirit speaks clearly. Judgment is not vengeance but restoration, and it is already unfolding. The signs you have witnessed are not coincidences but confirmations from God. When the manipulator's power wanes, when clarity returns, and when truth begins to speak louder than lies, it is not merely change, it is judgment unfolding gently yet firmly. You are not imagining it. God's timing is perfect, and He is fighting for you in ways that transcend what the eye can perceive. Therefore, I ask you, where do you find yourself in this process? Have you felt that emotional detachment, that stillness within your soul, that moment when peace of mind begins to return? Could it be that God is not only exposing the one who harmed you but also restoring the one they tried to destroy? Do not fear the shift, lean into it. Restoration and hope await on the other side. If this message resonates with your heart, I encourage you to share it with others, so they too may know they are not alone. Like a candle passed from one hand to another, the light grows stronger when shared.